years ago, I was in Seoul with one of my best friends, and he took me to this tiny vegan restaurant where I had gochujang tofu that straight up rewired my brain. Crispy, saucy, spicy. Just how? It was so good that when I came back home, I immediately had to recreate it. And turns out, it's stupidly easy. One sheet pan, a few condiments, barely any effort. Trust me, when you make tofu this way, you just might never get restaurant tofu ever again. I froze this tofu and then I thawed it overnight. The reason to do that is because freezing tofu completely changes its texture. It becomes chewier. My husband says it's almost meaty, and I think it just absorbs the sauce so much better. Total game changer. But we still need to get all the excess water out of the tofu, and which is what we're gonna do now. I'm actually gonna put my apron on because we're gonna be working with sauces. I know for sure that I'm gonna spill something myself. And just to give you a comparison, this is fresh tofu. So you see here, it's pretty wiggly. And this is frozen tofu. You'll see that it started crusting and it's a lot. And so the next thing here, so we're not gonna be working with the fresh tofu today, but you totally can. You don't need to freeze the tofu in order for this recipe to work, but I'm gonna be working with my previously frozen tofu. So in order to get all of the water out, you can use a fancy little tofu press that kind of looks like this, where you drop the tofu in here, put this on, and then you just snap the elastic into one of these. It's a little bit of a fun little exercise, I will admit, especially getting the second side on. There we go. You'll see it's pressing, and you'll want to leave this out for at least 10 to 15 minutes. Ideally, the longer, the better. We're gonna start with gochujang, and nowadays you can find gochujang in most normal like grocery stores in the international or Asian aisle. It's Korean chili paste, and this Simpio brand is the one that I use because it is vegan. Most gochujang is supposed to be vegan, but sometimes you can get residue in there. So just want to make sure that it is vegan. We're gonna start with that. We're gonna need about 1/4 of a cup of it. You don't have to start with that much if you are using gochujang for the first time. Even a couple of tablespoons would really give it the flavor that you're looking for. I am gonna get about 1/4 of a cup in there. I usually make my marinades in the same bowl that I'm gonna toss the tofu in. I think that avoids having 2 different bowls. Like, I just don't like doing dishes in general. And this also means that I'm making sure that there's no marinade left over anywhere. And then we're gonna need about 1 tablespoon of soy sauce. I'm using a reduced sodium variety because gochujang also has quite a bit of sodium in it. So if you're conscious of this, this is one way. Tablespoon. Then we'll want 1 tablespoon of sesame oil, 1 tablespoon of rice wine vinegar. You can also find this in most normal grocery stores in the Asian aisle, or you can go to an Asian grocery store for this. We want 1 teaspoon each of garlic powder, onion powder, or in my case, I'm actually using chopped onions because that actually adds a little bit more texture to the marinade, a little bit of salt, and then finally, a couple cracks of fresh black pepper. Then we're just gonna whisk it. And then finally, once the mixture is kind of like this, where it's all mixed in, I like to add a little splash of maple syrup just to give it a sweet balance. And then you mix that in, and then your marinade is done. Now it's ready to be tossed with the tofu. We're gonna chop up our tofu and we're gonna marinate it. Okay, it's been about 20 minutes. You are always welcome to leave your tofu pressing for longer, but this should get us enough moisture out. Now we have a pressed tofu. I usually like to give it one more quick hand press. You're always gonna get more water out by doing it this way, but should be pretty good to go. Now we're gonna cut this into cubes. So I usually do 4. You can see how spongy it is on the inside. You can either have it big or you can actually slice it in half initially. Totally up to you. I like doing it this way because I can never get a perfect half if I slice through it. I always end up having a zigzag version of it, and so some of them end up being super tall and some of them are not tall enough. So anyway, so now you have your tofu ready to go, and you just take all of it You want to be careful with the tofu because it is pretty delicate at this point, having been frozen and thawed. So you want to use a soft spatula. Silicone or rubber spatula will usually do the job just fine. And then for extra crispiness, you can use a type of starch. So I'm using cornstarch, but you can use potato starch, you can use arrowroot. People do different stuff. About 1 to 2 teaspoons, like heaped teaspoons, should do the trick. And then now you just want to coat, get it all nice and juicy and marinated. And this is why I like making the marinade in the same bowl that I'm gonna toss the tofu in, because now I can get every last drop of it on my tofu. Using a silicone spatula comes in handy too, because then you can grab anything that's left over when you're transferring it to a sheet pan and just put it on there. So now we're gonna transfer the tofu to a baking sheet. If you're using a non-stick baking sheet like I am, you don't need to line it with parchment paper or anything like that. But if you're using a traditional stainless steel baking sheet, I highly recommend that you use a parchment paper so that it doesn't stick to the bottom of the tray. And so I'm just gonna dump all this tofu in here first. Grab every last bit of the gochujang marinade. Get that on here as well. Now you'll just wanna spread it out so that they all have a chance to cook evenly. Don't be afraid to use your hands. Okay, this is ready to go into the oven. I have preheated my oven to 400°F, which is what we need for this. And you'll bake it for about 20 to 25 minutes until it's golden. Sometimes I will take it out midway through and I will flip the tofu, but it's totally up to you and the strength of your oven. So I'm gonna pop this into the oven now. And then just add some scallions on top. And we are rocking and rolling. Let's try this. That is